Okay, then thank you very much for coming today. This is the third edition of the Data Science Incubator, and the plan is to talk about the pull request helpers. Very briefly, I'm only going to focus on the main helpers. And the reason why we might want to do that is because a lot of people, including ourselves, are using GitHub as a platform for sharing code, and actually the workflow is pretty well polished, but it kind of has so many movable parts that it's very difficult to kind of learn and digest. So these helpers from the usethis package can help those who use R, can help them contribute code in a very fluent way, and those who maintain code as well. So that's the plan for today. So here in the repository associated to this meetup, you will find that there is a new issue number 3, that contains the links to basically the help file of these functions that you see now on screen, which this help file is really nicely written. So I'm going to walk through this help file and point to the main functions. So before we continue, just to check, are you seeing my screen okay? And also, can I ask those to unmute before we continue? So can you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we thought like we lost the connection.
Great.
So
you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. May I ask you to unmute yourself for a sec until you have questions or comments?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So this list of functions is kind of a comprehensive list, but I'm going to cover basically how to initiate a new pull request from the perspective of a contributor, then how to fetch a pull request that is already opened from the perspective of a maintainer, and then how to kind of push changes, either if you are a maintainer or a contributor, how to push changes from your local copy of a fork up to GitHub. And that's about it, really. The rest are kind of for more advanced use. And if you kind of get hooked to what I'm trying to kind of show today, then I'm sure you will learn the more fine-grained details on your own, and I'm here to help. So basically, scrolling down in this help file, the first thing you need to be aware of is how to set things up. The help file, it does include advice about that. The only kind of thing that you need to do that you may not have done so far is that you need a GitHub token. So the usethis package, of course, needs to be installed first so that you can run something like library usethis. And the usethis package itself includes a function called browse GitHub token. So this function, if you don't have a token already, you can use this function to create one. And the information about how to do that is well documented, particularly well in this tab here called Setup in the website of the usethis package. If you click there, you will see, you can scroll down to the menu here on the right, you will see that there is a link that describes how to get and store a GitHub personal token. So that's the instructions are here. I'm not going to cover them today because I will really focus on the PR helpers themselves. But feel free to kind of try the setup yourself, and if you have any issue, just discuss them with me. So once you have things set up, then, well, imagine that you are a contributor and that you want to contribute to a repository that someone else maintains. So let's pretend for a moment that the repository you want to contribute to is, for example, this very package called, or this very repository called DS Incubator. So the workflow that we have discussed in other sessions, in other meetings, is as follows. Basically, you go to the main repository where you want to contribute, and then you create a fork by clicking here in the fork button at the top right. Then you choose. Basically, you will be normally you will be using choosing your user account. So this is the one I'm going to choose. What this is doing is creating a fork, basically an identical clone of that main repository, but under your username. So now the person who owns that that repo or that copy of the repo, in this case is Mauro Lepore, is no longer the main repository, which was 2 degrees investing. So that was the main owner. So with this fork in place, you can, as usual, click here this clone button and copy the URL that you get there. Unless you have already set up SSH, the HTTPS protocol should be fine. I'm moving kind of fast through this because we covered it many times. But again, feel free to ask me questions if you're kind of struggling with this. This is so far the kind of usual workflow. And then the next step could be to open just any open session of RStudio. And I like using here this icon at the top right and go to the new project. And then you go to version control, Git, and then you paste the URL. Once again, we've covered this many times before, and this is like nothing new. But if you have questions, we can discuss them later. Then you would choose a location in your computer where you would like to store this, basically this local copy of your fork of the main repository. And I'm going to choose this folder in particular. I'm happy with this location where I pretend to be a contributor to that package, and I hit create project. While this happens, I would like to show you that the usethis package has actually a function that can help you do all of what we have just done in one step. For that, let me show you here. So if you were a contributor, you could do what we have just done, basically doing the fork and creating a local clone with the function create from GitHub, and then you would give the name of the owner. The owner would be 2 degrees investing, and the name of the repo. The repo would be ds-incubator. So this is a shortcut for doing what we normally do, as I showed before, right? So I did the kind of the long process, and you could, you're welcome to use this shortcut if you want. So let's go back to RStudio. So now what we have here is a local copy of our fork of the data science incubator repository. So as a contributor, remember that we are now pretending to be a contributor. Let's say that we want to add a new file to this repo. Actually, now I notice that in my practice of this talk, I already added a new file. So I'm going to add another file by clicking here, add script, and I'm going to type something, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just a demo, but just to show you what the world would look like for a contributor. So I'm going to type a line by a contributor. So this is going to be the change that I want to submit. I'm going to save this file. I'm going to say new file. Let's use lowercase. New file 2. It's just a random name of file. I couldn't come up with a better one. If I now go to the Git tab, you will see that first, what we have here is the name of the master branch, but that's wrong. That's simply that I need to kind of refresh. No, sorry. There we go. Actually, I did something wrong. I didn't intend. So I'm going to kind of revert back to what we were doing before. So let's pretend that I'm going to remove this repo from my local computer because I want to show I kind of skip one step. So I'm going to remove this repo completely. I'm deleting it from my computer, and I'm going to repeat the process where I go to my fork, right? I click the URL, then I go to any RStudio session, RStudio is opening now. I was, going ahead of myself. And remember, we go to this button here, create a new project, version control, Git, we paste the URL, we choose a location, which is fine with me, and we create a project. So now let me follow the script, because otherwise I kind of go ahead of myself. So if we go to the help file, this is what a contributor would do. If you want to initiate a pull request, you use the PR init function. So that's what we are going to do. As a contributor, let's pretend that I want to contribute with a new pull request, and I'm going to use first I'm going to load the package, to attach the package, use this, right? And we use the function PR init. This function takes the name of a branch. So something like my feature would work. And as you can see, usethis is kind of talking to Git and to GitHub and doing a lot of work for me. A lot of work that otherwise I would need to do manually, and it's like easy to kind of get wrong. And that's the magic of these PR helpers. So now what I wanted to show you before is if I go to the Git tab, what I see here is the name master, which belongs to the default branch where we land when we create a new project. However, this is unupdated. If I refresh here, you will see that the actual branch that Git knows about now is the branch my feature, which is the branch associated to the PR, the pull request that we are creating now. So now is when I start doing changes. You never start doing changes on master, you start doing changes in the feature branch of your pull request. So now I create, as a contributor, I create a file, I add a line by contributor, and then I save the file. Let's save it with the name new file 2, just a random file, a random name file that I chose. And now, yes, I do. What I want to do is to commit the changes. So basically, once you have initiated with the function PR init, you have initiated your pull request. You just work as normally, right? You just do changes and add those changes to version control by committing them. So now I'm going to do a commit by contributor. I do the commit, I close this window, and I can continue to do as many commits as I wanted. I could do a second commit if I wanted by adding another line, for example. And then if I changed, I create a second commit. Right? I commit that file. So if I see the history of what has changed lately, I can see that, well, the world for this PR started here at master, and then since then, I created a new feature branch, which is this branch here, and now it has 2 commits. The first commit message is this one, and the second one is this one. And all it changed is this file called new file 2 that now has 2 new lines. But all these changes so far live in my computer. So let's go back to the help file of the PR helpers to know what's next. So what we had just done is this part where we work locally, making changes to the files and checking them into Git. And then when you're ready to submit your pull request, all you need to do is to run the function PR push. So let's do that. Let's pretend that these 2 commits are all the commits that I want to share to submit in my pull request. So I simply follow the instructions that I read here. So I just do PR push. And again, the usethis package is going to be working along with Git and GitHub to make this happen. It's doing a lot of work for me, and now automatically it is opening this new window on the main repository on 2degrees incubator for me to kind of review what's going on and then click here, create pull request. So basically what's happening is that the commits that I added to the branch my feature in the DS incubator repository of my user account, those commits are going to travel, or I'm kind of proposing them to be included in the master branch of the data science incubator repository of the owner to the usethis. So this is simply just a shortcut to how to create a pull request. As a contributor, you could then add a message if you want. I don't need one, so I'm just going to click create pull request. And that's done. The pull request has been submitted. You see that in the tab pull request, there is number 1. So now, what would life look like for the maintainer? If you are maintaining, for example, the data science incubator package in the 2 Degrees Investing repository, and someone has submitted a pull request, what do you do? How these helpers can help you? Okay, so let's go now at here, and let's see what life looks for maintainers. So maintainers, what they will do is simply to fetch that pull request using the function prFetch. So now, let me kind of make a pause in this, talk, and let's now kind of change our mindset to pretend that we are no longer the contributors. Let's now wear the shoes of the maintainer, right? So okay, so what do we do now? Okay, so let me open a new let me open a project I have already stored in my computer. It lives somewhere else in this different folder. The project would look very similar, but let's now pretend that this is the computer of the maintainer, no longer the computer of the contributor. I acknowledge that this is a little confusing, but in the real world, the maintainer and the contributor would be 2 different people working from 2 different computers. So now let's pretend that this is the local repository of a maintainer. And the maintainer has seen that there is a new pull request right here in the tab, and the maintainer wants to fetch that pull request and review it and see kind of what's going on and maybe add some changes. So the first thing that the maintainer will notice is the number. It's the number 8. That's the number associated to the pull request that you can read here as well. So the maintainer, the person has to do is to run first it's going to load the package usethis, and then it's going to run the function prFetch. And you have to give it the number of the pull request that you want to fetch. So in this case, it's number 8. So prFetch should do the trick. As you can see, once again, the usethis package is working with Git and GitHub to make all the magic happen. And if you go here at the top right, you will see when I refresh the Git pane that the branch master will change to something different, which is the name of the branch that the contributor created with the suffix of the username. Actually, that's kind of a convention that the usethis package uses. So it creates a local copy of the pull request that was submitted by the contributor. Now, the maintainer can see the history of this pull request and notice, for example, that since the history in master, there have been 2 new commits associated to this pull request. Maybe the maintainer wants to add a new commit. For example, maybe they want to go to the file that was submitted, which was this one here, and add a new line by the maintainer. So let's pretend now that the maintainer is happy with the changes, but wants to add a new change, and maybe add a little details to the previous changes submitted by the contributor. Something like this could do. So these are the changes that the maintainer is adding to the pull request. Changes are made, and now we are going to commit those changes as the maintainer. A commit by the maintainer, we complete the commit. And now let's see what the health file says that we should do. Let's go back to the health file. So as a maintainer, we did this bit. We fetch the pull request, we made some changes, and then when we are ready, we run the function prPush, and that will push them back to GitHub. So let's do just that. Let's go here and do prPush. Remember, we are the maintainer now. Usethis again is working with Git and GitHub, making everything happen under the hood without us worrying too much about that. And it's also telling us that we could run, if we wanted, the function prView as a shortcut to just navigate to that PR on GitHub. That will automatically open this window on the web browser. And do we have any question there?
No, sir.
Good. Sorry. Okay, so what that function did, open this window on GitHub showing what the PR looks like. Let me kind of debrief what we see. We see these first two commits that were done by the person who pretended to be the maintainer, the contributor, which was me. And then this third commit is the commit added by the maintainer, which in this case is also me. But in the real world, this could be two different persons. So the commits by the contributor would come from someone, and the commit from the maintainer or maintainers would come from someone else. So let's pretend that this is ready to go. Then the maintainer can choose to merge this into master. So basically, the maintainer now has the power to include those commits into the main stream, the main branch, which is master of the main repository. So here is a summary of what's going to happen. The commits came from this branch of this owner, and they are going to travel into the master branch of the main repository. One common thing that I do personally is to squash these commits if they all relate to the same problem, which they should, because they all relate to one pull request. So I can just click squash and merge. You can also rewrite the commit history if you want, saying the commit message, saying something like new file 2 and confirm and squash. So that what we'll do is that although the PR has 3 commits, the history in the master branch will have only 1 commit. The 3 commits are kind of squashed into a single one and incorporated in the master branch. So we're kind of getting to the end of this. Let's see what else we can do. So for the maintainer, after they have merged the pull request, they simply run PR finish to kind of do cleanup. So let's do just that. Let's go to the local copy of this repo in the maintainer's computer, and let's run PR finish. So that what we'll do is basically it will get rid of the branch that was created for this pull request and do a little more cleanup, and that's it. The maintainer can continue working on the main repo or managing other pull requests. So for now, I'm going to close the RStudio session of the maintainer. And I'm going to direct your attention to a few other things that the contributor could do. So the contributor, of course, can also finish the pull request with the same function. So if we go to, now let's pretend again that we are the contributor. So the contributor has already, so his or her pull request has already been accepted and included into the mainstream package or repo. So there is nothing else that needs to be done in that particular pull request. So the contributor can, after attaching the package, once again, use this, can do as well PR finish, and that will also do some cleanup in his computer. So that's about it. There are a few other scenarios that are more complex, where, for example, the mainstream repo has new changes that are independent from the PR, and the contributor needs to kind of synchronize those changes before the PR can be submitted. So that magic is done by the PR sync, and we are not going to cover it because it's a little bit more advanced. It's not difficult to work with. It's very convenient, but we simply just don't have time. And then the PR view we already covered, basically a shortcut for browsing the PR on GitHub, and PR pause, which allows you to kind of stop what you're doing on the PR, go back to the master branch and do other things, and then you can resume your PR whenever you're ready. So these things I'm not covering intentionally, simply because we don't have time, and also because I'm pretty new to this approach, to be honest, and I'm trying it as I go. And honestly, I'm really liking how much faster and simpler my workflow becomes. So with that, I end what I planned to share with you today. So I would really like to hear your comments or questions before we say bye.
Thanks, Mauro. I've got one quick question. Maybe it's quick. With regards to a pull request, so I've initialized my branch, made my changes. I push it towards the master branch. Let's just say Klaus is or yourself are the maintainer, and you're on holidays, or you don't get to this, and I want to keep working on that. Do I unpull the pull request, or can I create a new pull request of that work that I've already been doing? Or can you maybe add one or two comments to when that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. You can, in your fork, which is like a clone from the main repo, you can do whatever you want independently from the maintainers. But if you want to continue kind of working off the main repo, you will need to do two things. Either kind of wait until, I mean, if you need to build on top of a PR that you already did, that PR has to be kind of merged eventually before you continue. So that's the ideal and the simplest scenario. But you can, if you want, go back to the. So say that you started with the state of master, then you created a PR which added 3 commits. If your new work is independent from those 3 commits that you added, then you simply, the workflow, what it does is you go back to the initial state before those 3 commits, and you add a new PR. So you can add as many PRs as you want of the state of the master branch of the main repo. And there is no problem if they are independent. But if one PR depends on the completion of the other one, then again, so you either wait until one is merged, or you just pretend that it was merged and you continue working off the top of the PR. So you do PR1, you add 3 commits, then you branch off the tip of that PR and you start a new PR, a new branch from there, hoping that when the maintainer incorporates your first PR, then everything will be ready to go for you to kind of merge the second PR as well. That is where things get a little tricky. It's kind of way beyond what we can do in 15 minutes, actually beyond that. But it is nothing that I want to kind of drop you alone on. So I would really like to kind of work with you and everyone else on solving those very tricky situations.
Cool, thank you.
I have a question. Do we have a organizational standard, and under what conditions you would do pull requests rather than making commits directly to the repository? That's not something I've experienced here yet, but maybe the other repositories have this kind of management structure. Under which cases would we want to use a pull request rather than just all making commits to the repo?
Great comment. I think we're heading towards one or few maintainers and as many contributors as you wish, and as making the permissions to push into the mainstream repo more restrictive. But that's something that it seems that is still kind of an open discussion. In my opinion, what feels like freedom, so the freedom from everyone to push into the master branch of the mainstream, is not freedom, but actually it is a pain in the butt, because you have to be very careful, right, to not screw things up. So I think it's better to just leave that responsibility to one person that knows the workflow well, at least until all the contributors that want to be privileged to push into master have gained experience, so that they know how to kind of at least fix merge problems and maybe revert commits and clean up the history. So that's basically my opinion. I would like to actually hear the opinion of others in the room to see if they agree or disagree with me.
So related to that, then, do you see the advantage of sending pull requests from a separate fork versus, like, for instance, having separate branches for the people that are working on a repo?
So I'm not very sure of the second part of your comment. I do see the benefit of the pull request approach that because, I mean, we are kind of following this GitHub workflow where, you know, you branch, you first fork, and then you create a branch from your fork, which is effectively something that you can then submit as a pull request. The benefit that I see is that the maintainer can push changes into the fork and not into mainstream. And then when everything is clean, you can squash the branch into a single commit, meaning that the the final commit history of the main repo becomes really clean, and the maintainer can add comments such as, you know, keywords such as, you know, closes, you know, PR such and such, or closes issue such and such, and thanks to add mentioned username and so forth. So I have a bunch of examples of that. I'm working a lot with Jackson, kind of polishing that workflow. But basically, the idea of working on a pull request allows you to drastically change the commit history of that pull request and clean it very neatly before you include it into the mainstream. Then, and I asked you how that relates to, you know, how is that different to having many branches on a repo? I don't know very much, and I would like to kind of hear how that worked for you before.
All right, well, we can talk about that separately because this may be a large topic, but yeah. I have worked on like an individual repo with multiple people, and then we all had our own separate branch, not a separate fork, but a separate branch within the individual repo, and then we could work on that separately and then merge back into master the changes that we made, which is pretty similar, but it means you don't have all these separate private forks from people.
Right. So then I think that, you know, basically, you know, having everyone having different branches in the main repo as opposed to from a fork, the main difference that I see is that of basically, you know, on a fork, I feel that it is easier to clean the history of a pull request and squash it into, you know, one nice commit that represents what has happened. But we should try it. You know, so far I'm liking the approach proposed by you know, this workflow. But yeah, if there's something potentially better, I feel that what you proposed might suggest that the contributors may need to have a relatively high level of understanding of the Git model, and the PR approach, particularly with the helpers, is kind of built so that even if you don't really know what is, you know, a branch and what is a fork, it just happens kind of under the hood, which is not very good for learning in the long run, but it is very good for kind of getting stuff done in best practices. Well, kind of just learning.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Mara.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.